So let's talk about Putin's price hike, because poor Joe Biden, the savior of our economy, things were going along just perfectly and swimmingly until Putin started a war in Ukraine. I mean, even Biden's not bold enough to put it that way, but he is blaming these crazy inflation numbers on Vladimir Putin. And you've been making two interesting points lately. Number one, it's not Putin's price hike. But number two, the inflationary numbers are worse than is actually being revealed. The number's not really 8.5. It's more like double that. So let's start with point one. Why is it not Putin's price hike that is causing inflation to now be at, I think it's a 41-year high, 8.5%?
Well, first of all, we've been dealing with much higher than expected inflation numbers, for a long time. All of last year, all of 2021, long before Putin invaded the Ukraine, prices kept going up month after month, more than expected. And the Fed kept saying, don't worry about it. It's transitory. It'll go away on its own. And in fact, the Fed was finally forced to reluctantly admit that inflation wasn't transitory. And all this happened before Putin invaded the Ukraine. And by the way, even if you're going to try to blame some inflation on the invasion, it's more the sanctions that are affecting prices than the invasion itself. Not that I'm saying that, we should condone the invasion, but, we also have to accept the responsibility that the U.S. is leading the charge on these sanctions. And it may be the sanctions that have more to do with it than the invasion itself. But I think neither is the culprit. It's all the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. It's Congress, it's the Biden administration that has been spending money that it was not collecting in taxes. We were running record budget deficits, and the Federal Reserve was monetizing those deficits. We were printing all this money, and the government was spending it. We told people not to go to work, not to be productive, don't help make stuff, don't provide services, but here's a bunch of money to go out and spend. We want you buying stuff even though you're not making stuff. And so we flooded the country with money. At the same time, the production of goods and services slowed down. And of course, prices went up. It's not a surprise. It's exactly what I was saying was going to happen when they first went down this misguided path. And so we're simply reaping the whirlwind of the wind that we sowed.
It's too much money chasing too few goods, and they just kept pushing money after money after money into the economy, and then finally found a scapegoat, Vladimir Putin. Great. That's going to involve oil and gas shortages, and we can blame everything on him. No one's buying it. And
by the way, Megyn, the sheer volume of goods coming into the United States is at an all-time record high. So we've never had so much stuff coming into the country as we have right now. The problem is we printed even more money. And that's why everybody is, chasing all this stuff. So the problem isn't a lack of stuff. It's a surplus of money. Because the government can print money, but they can't print stuff. So if they keep printing money, clearly prices have to go up because there's nothing to buy with the money they print.
Mm-hmm. And why is it worse than 8.5?
Well, when the government calculates the official CPI, there's a methodology that they use, and they purport to try to take into account substitution or improvements in quality to adjust the price. And so the prices that are actually coming out of the CPI are not the prices that go in. There's a lot of manipulation going on to arrive at that number. And when the government changed the CPI in the 1990s, they specifically said that they thought the CPI, in the 80s and 70s was flawed because they thought that because they didn't account for substitution and
wait, let me just stop you and to dumb it down a little bit, okay? Just dumb it down. So CPI is Consumer Price Index, and we look at this to see how much certain goods, people like me look at it to see how much has, have groceries gone up, this March over last March, or this month over the month before. How much, what about, all consumer goods that we buy, basically.
Right. So let me give you an example. So take groceries. Yep. Let's say the price of broccoli goes way up. They decide, well, consumers didn't buy broccoli because it was so expensive. Let's take it out and let's stick Brussels sprouts in there because Brussels sprouts didn't go up as much. And then they say, oh, steak prices really went up. Okay, let's say people bought chicken instead of steak. And so we'll take out the steak and we'll assume they bought chicken. They make all these adjustments. The basket is not fixed.
Oh,
yes, that's correct.
Okay,
but
I got
before they fixed it, right, in the 1990s, the CPI represented a fixed basket of goods. So all they did is look at the price of goods and then look at how much the price changed. And if we were measuring prices today, the way we measured them in the 80s and the 70s, because we want to go back and say, oh, this is the worst inflation since 1981. Well, if we measured inflation today using the same CPI that they used in 1981, that's where we'd probably be at about 17%, not 8.5%. So this is the worst inflation in the history of the country if we measure it accurately. But the government doesn't want to be honest about inflation. It lies about inflation the way it lies about everything.
Well, one of the other stories we're starting to see now from the media is this is peak. Don't worry. This is like the good news is we've peaked. And of course, I don't know anything about money, but I do know that I was told inflation was transitory and not to worry. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. So when they tell me it's peak, I don't believe them. Should I believe them?
No. I mean, first of all, they said it peaked a while ago. And so we're higher than where it was when it supposedly peaked. But it's as peaked as it was transitory. And there's no reason to believe that it's peaked. Think about where interest rates are. Even though the Fed is talking about raising them, they're still at 25 basis points, 0.25%. The last time inflation was this high in 1981, interest rates were at 20%. So we're not even close to 1%, let alone 20%. So inflation is not coming to an end like it was in 1981. It's just getting started. This is like 1971, not like 1981. We have a long way to go. We're not even close to the peak of inflation.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.